Hi friends, welcome back to the Homespun Annie channel. So the day before yesterday, we got a bunch of fresh new snow, and by the time it had finished snowing later on in the day, we had about 5 inches or so of fresh snow. And that morning I went out on a 5-mile run, and the snow made everything so quiet and so peaceful that it just ended up being a very relaxing run. And I really enjoyed just the beauty of it and how calm it was. And so with all the snow, it just kind of put me in the mood to make some soup. So I didn't have a recipe for this soup, but I just kind of looked at what I had on hand and decided to make a sausage and potato soup. And when I put potatoes in my soup, if I'm not blending the soup up, I like to bake the potatoes first. I like that texture a lot better than cooking them in the liquid of the soup. And so I just like the texture that so much better. So I bake them and then chop them up and then add them to the soup at the very end. So I use a little bit of avocado oil and a little bit of salt, and then I wrap them in foil kind of loosely. I don't do it too tightly. And then I put them in the oven until they're baked. And like I said, I chop them up and add them to the soup at the end. So with this soup, we have a bunch of bones from a half a pig that we bought from my husband's brother this last fall. And so I have been using those bones to make broth, and it makes the most delicious broth. So earlier, I put some of the bones in a pot with some onions and carrots and garlic, which I usually do celery, but I did not have celery, so there was no celery, but that's okay. And so I made the broth, and usually I cook that, and simmer that for about 2 hours. And then I strain it through a metal strainer, and then I just set that aside while I'm getting the rest of the soup ready. And I also needed to make some bread. I hadn't made bread in probably a week, so it was time for some fresh bread. So I got the potatoes into the oven and started the bread. And I like to make it's just a real simple honey wheat bread. And here you can see the dough risen. And one of my favorite things is to punch the air out of the dough. And I only have glass Pyrex bread pans, and so I put parchment paper in them to make taking the loaves out that much easier. This was a trick I only learned this, last year. I wish I had known this trick a long time ago. For whatever reason, I didn't know. I saw a friend do this on Instagram where she lined her glass bread pans with parchment paper, and I was just like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? And so anyway, I lined them with parchment, and I got those into the pans and got that rising for its second rise. And then, of course, here's some sausage. and just real simply just browned up the sausage in the pan and got that browning. And then while that was browning, I chopped up an onion. And so, like I said, I just used what I had on hand. And so I didn't have a ton of veggies, but I did have onion and I had carrots and some garlic. So just kept it very simple. And that's kind of what I love about soup is you really can just you don't have to have a recipe. You can literally use what you have on hand. Like when you know the basics of how to make a broth and how to layer the flavors and build the flavors, you really can just make soup with whatever you have. And one of the shows that I've really enjoyed watching is called The Lost Kitchen, and it's on Discovery Channel. It's actually from the Magnolia Network on the Discovery Channel, on Discovery Plus. Sorry. And Aaron French, who is the owner and main chef of The Lost Kitchen, I love it when she makes soup. I just love watching her make soup. And she just creates the most delicious looking soups. And so I was watching that. We just finished the latest season, but it just made me want to make soup and just create soup. And so I've been kind of having fun, like playing around making soup, and I made it had fennel and mushrooms. Oh man, I'm trying to remember now what I put in it. See, I didn't have a recipe. I went to the store and I grabbed what looked good. But I know it had fennel and mushrooms and onion, shallots, and potatoes. And what I did is I ended up blending it all up. But I used bacon. I didn't put bacon in the soup, but I rendered down some bacon and sauteed the vegetables in the bacon fat. And anyways, kind of layered the flavors from there. But I don't remember everything I put in it. But all that to say is I had so much fun just creating this soup. And then I blended it so that it was a completely creamy soup, and then put it through a metal strainer. So it was very smooth, and oh my goodness, it was so good. You just get like the fennel and then this like hint of mushrooms. And anyway, I'll have to make it again and actually do a video of it and kind of create a recipe for it, because it was just so good. And I put a bunch of it in the freezer. But anyway, I was so inspired by watching The Lost Kitchen and her make soup. And it just made me want to create a bunch of new soups. So anyways, I got the carrots and the onions in with the sausage and got those sauteing up. I added a few little cloves of garlic and got those chopped up and added. And so yeah, the thing with soup is just knowing how to layer the flavors, and starting with the broth and making a broth that has, depth of flavor, and, going from there. I'm not an expert. I just I don't know all the science behind it. I just know that I just love that process. And I love just making soup from whatever I have. So, yeah, but got the garlic in there. And I always add my garlic towards the end of the vegetable sautéing so that it doesn't burn. And then here's the pork broth that I made. And I went ahead and added that in and got that simmering. And then once the potatoes were done, I got them out of the oven. And got them unwrapped from their foil. And the one thing about them is of course they're very hot. And so they're very hot to handle right away when you get them out of the oven. So I usually unwrap them. And then I will cut them in half to just kind of speed up the cool down process a little bit more so that I can more easily chop them up. And then, once they've cooled down some, just chop them into whatever size pieces seem good. But yeah, like I said, I like this texture so much better in the soup, especially when I'm not blending the soup up. If I was blending the soup up, I would just cook them in the broth. But and then once I had pulled the potatoes out of the oven, the bread had been ready for its had gotten its second rise in, and so I put the bread in the oven. So that was baking while I was finishing up the soup. And then just throw the potatoes in at the very end. And the only thing I seasoned the soup with was salt and pepper, fresh cracked pepper. I didn't use any fancy seasonings or anything. And then here's the bread, fresh out of the oven. And of course, my husband and my son wanted it fresh out of the oven, so cutting it right away, it was a little soft, but yeah, there's nothing like fresh bread out of the oven. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and also share it with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I will talk to you in the next video.